Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So today we're focusing on some of the more interesting cards from the most recent core set, Supreme Darkness. The set is definitely an interesting one. I would argue that the Ultras are ultimately going to be more sought after than the Secret Rares, and that's definitely going to result in some weird price movements in the future. Now naturally, we're going to see a bunch of different changes over this week. Primarily, I would assume that things will be dropping as more and more people get access to the set and crack it open. But what we really need to keep an eye on is going into next weekend, where YCS Orlando will really tell us the impact on the meta that this set had. Let's get started. Kicking things off, we'll take a look at what is for now the most expensive card in the set, Mulcharmy Meows. So this card is the third of the Mulcharmy monsters, and admittedly it does appear to be the weakest of them. It draws when your opponent summons from their graveyard or banishment, so it's a bit more limited in terms of what decks it's going to be useful against. However, that said, it does have the potential to be really powerful in any specific format. In the current format, Meows is really strong against the Malice deck, since they summon from the banished pile all the time, but it still comes after Fuolos. However, I do think that moving forward, we're going to see a lot of players choose to run 6 Mulcharmies, where they're using Fuolos and then either Perulia or Meows, depending on how the rest of the format looks. That said, Meows was a very expensive card as a pre-release card, coming in at around $70. It did see a pretty sharp drop right away, and it looked like it was gonna continue dipping down underneath the $50 mark, but over this past weekend the price has rebounded back up a little bit, and the card now sits between $55 and $60 each. Now personally, I think that's where this card is going to stay roughly. It's actually pretty similar to where Perulia was for a while there, but Perulia is much more likely to be reprinted soon given the Fuolos reprint confirmation, so Meows retains the relatively higher price. Either way, do keep an eye on this card going into YCS Orlando, because if it does end up seeing a lot of competitive play, we could definitely see this card continue to shoot back up. Up next, we have Abao Aku, the Lightless Shadow. Now, this is a Link 4 monster out of the newest set, and it's fairly easy to make, but it does require one of its materials to be a Fiend monster. However, it's a really strong monster to end your board with. It has a quick effect where you discard a card, and then either destroy a card on the field non-targeting, or banish it until the end phase and special summon any light or dark monster from your graveyard. It also has an effect during your standby phase where you can draw cards and then put back cards to the bottom of your deck, equal to the number of different monster types that you have in your graveyard. So that's a really cool way to filter your hand, make sure that you're not sitting on too many hand traps if you happen to have drawn them later. At the moment, it seems that this card has found a home in Malice. A lot of builds have abandoned Terahertz and are instead using this card to special summon back a Nightmare Griffin and stun your opponent out of using monster effects. Definitely a really cool thing, but this is something that we're going to have to wait and see how exactly it's used at YCS Orlando before we see what the sort of consensus optimal way to play Malice is. Now, price-wise, this card has probably seen the biggest fall off out of all of the secret rares from Supreme Darkness. This card was like $60 to $70 as a pre-release card, but it is just a one-of for one of the decks this format, and it's not even the best deck, so it has since fallen to around the $30 mark. Honestly, I do think that this card will continue to drop to around the $20 mark as more and more people crack open the product. It should stay relatively down there, perhaps until the next ban list. It could go up if Malice does become the best deck in the game. I do want to take a second to remind all of you to check out our website, MSTmerch.com. Now, over at MSTmerch.com, we have everything that you will need to optimize your Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament experience. We have the basics with white, black, pink, and our new purple matted sleeves, which are my personal favorites, as well as smooth and matted sleeves to double sleeve your valuable cards and sleeves with for tournament play. But we also have some other items that you can really use to customize your collection. We have amazing foil sleeves, including some with the MST.TV logo, and dividers and subdividers so that you can keep your collection perfectly organized and easily accessible. Regardless of if you're a competitive or casual player, I'm certain that you'll find something that you will enjoy over at MSTmerch.com. Alright, so here's where we start getting into the really cool stuff, starting with Mitsurugi Ritual. So whereas Meows is kind of a maybe as to whether or not it'll see play, and Abao is just for Malice, Mitsurugi Ritual is a really strong card for arguably the best deck in the game. I think that right now it's kind of a toss-up between Mitsurugi Ritual and Fiendsmith Ritual. They both have strengths and weaknesses. It wouldn't surprise me if either of those decks won YCS Orlando. I believe that Triff just played the deck at the regional this past weekend, and he was running 3 copies of this card in his Mitsurugi Ritual build. Definitely a really strong card. It sort of fixes the inherent problem that ritual decks have, right? You can either summon the ritual monster from your deck or tribute the monsters from your deck. So it's really strong, but it's also sort of balanced. Now with this card, it's actually really expensive for an ultra rare, so much so that I don't think we've seen an ultra rare this pricey in quite a while. Literally over the weekend, this card was down at $18 to $20, but at some point on Sunday, this card shot up in price and now sits at around $30 to $35 per copy. I don't know. On one hand, I find it unrealistic for an ultra rare from a core set to be worth this much. I think the closest thing that we have recently is Poplar, but Poplar was just a 2 of. At the same time, Fiendsmith is very likely to be hit on the next ban list, and Mitsurugi Ritual could overtake it and become the clear best deck in the game, which would cause this card to go up. Mitsurugi also gets new support cards coming in Alliance Insight, and that could bolster the strategy, maybe have it be integrated with something else or be played as a pure deck. And on top of all of that, the secret rares in Supreme Darkness are actually pretty weak in terms of value, which means that more value can be reasonably allocated to the top end ultra rares. Definitely something that's going to be interesting to see, and we're going to have to wait until YCS Orlando and some more concrete results before we can say what's going to happen with this card's price for sure. Up next, this is a card I'm still kind of shocked that they actually made an ultra instead of a secret. It's Primite Dragon Ether Barrel. So if you've been paying attention to the OCG recently, you will know that the Blue Eyes deck has been really dominant over there, and that's partially due to its incorporation of the Primite engine. For existing cards, we have cards like Lordly Load and Drill Beam, but Ether Barrel is the card that really brings the two packages together, as it provides consistency by helping you to access the Primite spells, while also being a dragon that can be used to make the Blue Eyes Link 1 monster. Now in the TCG already, we've seen Lordly Load go from being like a $5 secret rare all the way up to $60 a piece, and that should really speak volumes about the hype that players have for the Blue Eyes cards, since not only will it be easily accessible from the structure deck and appeal to casual players, but it's also going to be an actually strong meta-relevant strategy as well. Now that said, I actually feel like Ether Barrel is almost a little bit undervalued. At the moment, it's coming in at $25 to $30, which is less than Mitsurugi Ritual, and it feels really weird to say this, right? Since an Ultra being $25 to $30 from the most recent core set is actually kind of crazy. However, as we mentioned with Mitsurugi Ritual, it does feel like some of the more sought after playable cards from Supreme Darkness are in the ultra rare slot as opposed to secret rare, so that could keep the secret rare prices low and the ultra prices a bit higher than we generally see. Given the hype that we've seen for cards like Lordly Load and Drill Beam, I just think Ether Barrel could absolutely see some similar craziness. If you are definitely wanting to play Blue Eyes this upcoming format, it might actually not be a bad idea to try to pick up your copies of Ether Barrel sooner rather than later for around $20 to $25 each. Alright, the last card I want to talk about from Supreme Darkness is sort of a strange one. It's Metal Flame Swordsman. So in Rage of the Abyss, we got all the new versions of Metal Morph and different monsters. The cards may seem like they're just for rogue decks that no one's really going to care about at all, but Red Eye's Black Full Metal Dragon equipped with a max Metal Morph is actually really scary to deal with. Metal Flame Swordsman is a card that I want to keep an eye on simply because it is a searcher. You put it back into your deck from your hand, then you search for any card that mentions max Metal Morph in its text. So right now I don't think there's anything really too crazy that's looking to use this sort of package, right? To bring out the Full Metal Dragon, you need to tribute a level 5 or higher dragon, which admittedly you could do with the Bestials right now. It's just not really something that's going to see much usage. However, looking ahead to Alliance Insight, I think it's possible that Dragon Rulers could definitely look to make use of this card. For now, Metal Flame Swordsman is only a $2 to $3 card, which is still more than the dollar or so that a lot of Ultras end up at, but I think it's still reasonably affordable. Keep an eye on this card, as I feel like it's something that definitely has the potential to go up in value down the road. I could see it being a $5 card at some point. I think it definitely doesn't hurt to grab these for $1 or $2 in trades if you can pick them up at your locals. Okay, so a couple of cards outside of Supreme Darkness to touch on here. The first one is Typhoon. So this is technically a hand trap. I don't think it's something that ever really saw that much play. The card itself is really simple. You target a face-up spell or trap on the field and destroy it, but it's a trap that you can activate from hand during your opponent's turn if your opponent controls 2 or more spell or traps and you don't control any. This card has always been a bit of an awkward one to use. You want to use it to hit field spells or continuous spells, since destroying them means that you can't resolve their on-activation effects. However, generally, that card will be your opponent's only spell or trap card on the field. Looking ahead to next format, however, this is actually something that the OCG is teching into their side decks. This card is useful against Orchest, since you can hit Orchestrated Babble and stop them from activating the effects of their Orchest monsters during your turn, and they'll typically end on Orchestrated Babble plus a Crescendo in the back row, so Typhoon is live. Also, against Blue Eyes, you can shut off True Light, and they will often end with both True Light as well as the field spell. Now, of course, the TCG and OCG formats are very different. Typhoon seems like it would be an absolutely horrible card against Ryziel or Malice, so it definitely depends on how the format evolves. The card is really easily accessible, as it even had an ultra rare printing in Dual Devastator that's still only like 25 cents or so. However, the super rare is the hardest to find rarity, as it came back out in OTS1. Even then, there's nothing super crazy about it. They are going for around $2 to $3 each right now. This is more just something for you guys to be aware of, as it's something that has the potential to be much more sought after of a card in the upcoming formats. And finally, the last card we're looking at for today is Virtual World Kyuubi Shen Shen. So Shen Shen is a generic level 9 synchro monster, and it's something that's being looked at as an extra deck tech for the Blue Eyes strategy. This card has a couple of effects. I think the only one that people really care about is the first one, where any card sent from the field to the graveyard is banished instead. Now, unfortunately, this card doesn't banish Xyz materials, but it does make this card very annoying for any deck using the Fiendsmith engine to deal with. It's not as great as something like Dimension Shifter against Ryziel, since they can still send from the extra deck to the graveyard to summon out Ext, but if they are on the Mitsurugi engine, that's another thing that has a hard time playing without graveyard access. Now, even looking forward, this could be something that's really difficult for Orchest to play around as well, but we don't know when that deck is going to be coming to the TCG fully. That said, some Blue Eyes players are looking ahead and trying to pick this card up. Fortunately, Shen Shen has a common reprint from an OTS tournament pack and was also a super rare in one of the tins, so just getting a copy of this card to play with should be really easy. However, the original secret rares are the card's only high rarity printing. They're generally at around $2 to $3, but they're now up to between $6 and $8 each. I don't think that this is a card to go crazy for really, since those low rarity printings do exist. Keep an eye on this card once the Blue Eyes structure deck does release, as it could rotate in and out of the format depending on what other decks are strongest. Alright guys, that is all we have for today's episode. I don't know what's up with Supreme Darkness. Guys, I've opened 4 total boxes of Supreme Darkness, including the one that Konami sent us early. I've pulled 4 QCRs from the set, and also out of 4 boxes, I've pulled 3 of the Mulch Army. So I think my luck's just kind of crazy with this set. I'm gonna try to buy another box and see if I can keep the streak going. Anyways, guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.